I'm going to start saying that as soon as I get into Zoom every day. I'm just going to, yeah, Jordan, I'm ready. What is up, everybody? It is Friday. Now we got a full baseball slate followed by a preseason slate. So Eric and I are going to be doing MLB Live Before Lock, followed by our friends Lofty and Makajeski breaking down another NFL preseason slate. So as you guys come in, do us a favor, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Shout out to Sleeper, who is sponsoring our show today. If you guys want to sign up at Sleeper, there's a link below. You guys want to use that to sign up because that's going to make sure to get a $100 bonus on your first deposit when you sign up at Sleeper. Get yourself access to stuff like 100x payouts. You're not going to find on any other pick'em site. So go take advantage of Sleeper and some of their long odds parlays you can put together with home runs, strikeouts, anything you think of in the baseball streets, and football, obviously coming soon, up to 100x payouts. Eric, what is happening today?
Not much. Just kind of getting some stuff done over here. Was making some trips back and forth to the house. I'm going to be in there officially on Tuesday. Ready to rock with that. Otherwise, it's good to have it be Friday. Yesterday was not good in terms of the old betting space. And so looking to run it back, looking to have a better Friday.
Yeah, it was a weird slate for me yesterday because I ended up playing different players than I thought I was going to on the show, and didn't really make a difference either. Like I was on, I actually ended up with like a decent amount of Libertor, and then my most stacked team ended up being the Rockies. After what happened was you and I were talking, and like the more we talked about, I was like, I don't want anything to do with Clayton Kershaw, which ended up being the right side of Kershaw to be on. But what ends up happening, once I've really lowered the projection on Kershaw and reran my lineups through the Sims, it was like, you're playing all of the Rockies now, which I thought through. I was like, you know what? That kind of makes sense. I can get behind it. And what ends up happening, Kershaw sucks, but so do the Rockies bats on the other side, or just nothing really happened in that game. So, you know who did do well, though? Our guy, Josh Engelman, won the $15 for $50K last night. So shout out to Josh. And if you guys want to sign up for all the data and tools we have at Stokastic.com to win some big money like Josh Engelman, sign up using that link below. Get 50% off any package that we have here over at Stokastic.com. But let's focus on tonight's slate now, where yesterday we had a chalky Kershaw who ended up struggling largely due to pitch count and him just not going very deep into the game, which we speculated could happen yesterday. And instead, we have a very chalky Lance Lynn on the mound, who we never have any concerns with pitch count when it comes to Lance Lynn, because no matter which team he's been on the last few years, whether it's going well, whether it's going poorly, teams tend to like to leave Lance Lynn out there to throw a million pitches. But for today, Eric, he's kind of a no-brainer for cash games against the Rockies. What are you going to do with him in tournaments? $8,900 on DraftKings, projected for 53% ownership, and then on FanDuel, $9,900, projected for 39% ownership on a single pitcher site. So what do you do with Lance Lynn when he's in a great spot, but he's this popular?
I'm going to be just below the field if the slate started right now. Now that can change. There's obviously lineup iterations that we still need to have come through there. But he's in a really good spot. He's 8,900. I think that's kind of the major issue that I would have with fading him. He's just allowing me to do so much with my bats. I mean, we're going to talk Braves. We're going to talk some of these other spots where it's like, these are not cheap bats to be getting to on this kind of a slate. And 8,900 does a lot for you to afford you the opportunity to roster them. You have Castillo, you have Snell, you have Burns. I like all of them, but I think that it's kind of not without question that Lance Lynn's in the best spot of anybody. Castillo gets a tough spot against Baltimore, even if it is at home in a great ballpark. Blake Snell on the road against Arizona, they don't strike out a whole heck of a lot against lefties, although I think he's still my favorite of the contrarian pitching options. And then Corbin Burns, your dude, has looked great, but the White Sox, they're in a pretty homer-happy ballpark there. 6th most home runs in baseball this season. So it feels kind of like Lance Lynn. If you're making one lineup, I would still encourage you to be playing him in that one lineup and finding other ways to get different. But playing at an allotment of 150, I find myself being slightly under 53.3% on DraftKings.
So I uploaded 5,000 lineups to our Sims tool. I'll be doing 10,000 after we get all the lineups that are out, and I'll finish building out lineups with, updated ownership. I'm going to have Lance Lynn in almost all my lineups today. So the way that I built out my lineups, like I said, uploaded into the Sims tool, ended up getting to 91% of Lance Lynn. So here's the main reason why. You look at our projections for pitchers today, and we don't have the best pitching options. We do have, individually good pitchers, but a lot of them are in somewhat suboptimal matchups for a variety of reasons, right? Luis Castillo against the Orioles, good offense. We've got Blake Snell on the road against the Diamondbacks. They've been a good offense this year, and Arizona's a hitter-friendly park. Blake Snell on the road. Then you got Corbin Burns also in a pretty good matchup against the White Sox, but he's $11,200 over on DraftKings, which is a steep price tag to play. And on top of all of that, we have Lance Lynn projected so much better than every other pitcher on the slate. We have Lance Lynn project for 21.3 fantasy points. The next highest projection we have on anybody is Luis Castillo at 18.6. So as a result of that, when I run my lineups that I built through our Sims tool, which if you guys want to sign up, there's a link for it below. I get to 91% of them, and I don't really have an issue with that. I did something similar the last Lance Lynn start when he was pitching against the Oakland A's, or was that 2 starts ago? I'm trying to remember. Was that?
I don't know. I'm going to judge you for not knowing. You're a liar. Yeah.
The A's start. It was the A's start 2 starts ago where he was projected for something, say it was like 48% ownership against the A's, and he landed in like 90% of my laps. It's going to be the same scenario here in a similar sort of matchup against the Rockies. But now on the other side, if you're trying to pivot off of Lance Lynn, who of the other pay up options on the slate do you think make for the best guy to get to in a scenario where you don't want to play Lance Lynn in a lineup?
Blake Snell. I have an absolute metric ton of Blake Snell today. 31.3% K rate. He's gotten better and better and better as the season has progressed. He actually just started out the season downright shitty. The walks are always going to be an issue. 13.7% walk rate, but he's going to run into starts where he doesn't walk guys, and he's immune. And I understand this is an Arizona offense, as you said, pretty decent ballpark, at least, for the doubles and triples of things of that nature. And then it's also a pretty darn good offense, even though they've been struggling of late, losers of 8 straight games. Not that I care all that much about it. They've also had a 101 WRC plus against righties and then been better, I believe, against lefties. I got to find that number here for 1 second. But either way, Blake Snell is just breaking everything I'm doing because you run into a spot where he has 1 or 2 walks, and I think there's legitimate like 9-10 strikeout upside here. And there is literally 0 ownership coming in. 6.7% ownership. He's the lowest owned between the Lynn, Castillo, Burns, those 4 main guys that I've kind of been staring at all day long, figuring out what I want to do with them. I'm sure you're probably looking at Corbin Burns, and it depends what bats you're going to be putting with it. But Blake Snell saves me $600 off of Burns. He's lower owned. And yeah, no value percentage that's going along with it. But in tournaments today, I think there's just a huge ceiling, and that's all I really care about.
I don't mind getting to Luis Castillo, who is at least going to be at home in a pitcher-friendly park. He's fairly popular, 25% ownership. Here's where I'm at with the other 2 guys and why I'm going to agree with you. If I'm looking to pay up for a pitcher and also try to be contrarian, Eric, I'm going to go with Blake Snell over Corbin Burns because as much as I have my biases towards Corbin Burns, just like him in general, he is still very expensive today, $11,200. It's a price tag that I'm just finding it difficult to get all the way up to. And the $600 in salary savings for Blake Snell does mean I prefer him to Corbin Burns. Now, with all that said, if I'm comparing Castillo, Snell, and Burns, I get the most exposure to Castillo of the 3, but Castillo's project for 25% ownership, so I'm still underweight to these guys, whereas Blake Snell and Corbin Burns both sub 10% ownership. I think it's easier of those 2 to get, or I should say of those 3, the easiest to get overweight to Blake Snell. So if I'm paying up for somebody who is not Lance Lynn, I'm going to go with my answer as being Blake Snell. The one I have the least interest in of all the pay up options here that are picking up ownership, it is Justin Verlander. Is that the same for you?
Yeah, I mean, the K rate's just fallen precipitously. This is, I mean, maybe he's like Superman where he goes into the phone booth, puts on a Houston Astros uniform, and he just becomes, Superman again. But a 20.5% K rate, you just kind of compare that across the board where Blake Snell's north of 30%. You've got your guy, Corbin Burns. He's been pretty fantastic in that mid-range. And I think Lance Lynn, I mean, you get an opportunity to work with the Dodgers and alleviate some of your power problems. You get Will Smith as your caddy, as opposed to Yasmani Grandal, who, for all intents and purposes, has fallen off a cliff from his defensive prowess. He used to be one of the best catchers in baseball. Then he got the yips with the Dodgers, gets shipped out because they weren't going to pay for a below average bat from both sides. Made sense to me. But Lance Lynn, 26.8% K rate against a Rockies team that strikes out the most in baseball. I mean, for me, it's just, I would rather play everybody in this range rather than getting to Justin Verlander with any kind of ownership. And well, he's got a lot of it today. So I have 0%.
Of every single player on this slate, every single player, the one I'm the most underweight to is Justin Verlander. Of the 150 lineups that the Sims tool sorted for me, I got to 4.7% of Justin Verlander. So hardly any of him showed up, which I'm totally cool with. Like, it's a good matchup for him and everything. But at the same time, too, what is the realistic upside for a pitcher who, if I'm not mistaken, this is as expensive as he's been since the start of the year when we weren't aware that he was going to be this bad. And that's not even fair to say this bad relative to expectations. It's not like he's totally been terrible. He's just kind of like a league average to slightly above league average pitcher this year. And he's priced at 9,400. And the price change seems to be a result of him getting traded, which, like, how much do we expect a trade to improve? He's 40 years old. He's had a decrease in velocity. The swing and miss stuff isn't quite as good. I think this is an age thing for Justin Verlander more than anything. 40 years old, had Tommy John surgery a couple of years. He's fine. I just don't want to pay for him at $9,400 when he's chalk. So Justin Verlander, I like coming in underweight to the field on him. One other thing I want to ask you before we move on from talking about the high-end pitchers. FanDuel, I think it's really easy. You're playing Lance Lynn in cash games.
Yep. Done.
DraftKings, also easy. You're playing Lance Lynn in cash games. Here's where it gets tricky, though. Who is the pitcher you like pairing with Lance Lynn and DK Cash?
See, and I'm not playing DK Cash, and I knew you were going to ask me that as you were going across, and I started running some stuff. My number one optimal lineup today has Luis Castillo paired with him. I think you probably eat the ownership with him instead of Justin Verlander. I'm more inclined to go the Castillo-Lynn route. Yeah, Baltimore is pretty terrifying, but it's the best pitching park in baseball, and I think at least from a strikeout perspective, you're still going to have some kind of availability there based on how this Baltimore lineup shows out. You got to assume Ryan O'Hearn's going to be in there north of a 23% strikeout rate. Gunnar Henderson, as good as he's been, 26.7% K rate. I think the K rate combined with the matchup, yeah, there's terrifying parts of it, but he's got a 28% K rate, a little bit more at home. And yeah, always nice to be in a ballpark that mitigates a lot of run creation. So I'm probably going to say Castillo, even though for tournaments, I'm just getting to more Blake Snell and Corbin Burns.
All right. So we've got in the YouTube chat, we had Doug Mack said that he can't hear the little guy. The other dude is loud as fuck, though. So I don't know which of us he thinks is the little guy. But in real life, I'm the little guy. For the purposes of us doing the show together, I don't know which of us is the little guy and which one is the loud as fuck guy. But Doug, what's that? Mine is?
Right. Speak up, Buttercup.
Let's see. All right, I'm the little guy here. Here we go. Volume up.
Actually, it's Nick that's the little guy, but that's a different
So I turned the volume up. I also moved it a little bit closer to me. We'll see. We'll see what ends up happening. Thank you anyway, Doug Mack, for shouting that out there in the YouTube chat. I have an answer for you, Eric. So there's 3 players that are picking up decent ownership that I think we could consider, and we could eliminate them as we go through. So Justin Verlander, 26% owned. I'm going to eliminate him just for all the reasons talked about before. I think he's overpriced and overowned. For cash games, the ownership becomes less of a concern, but still, don't love Justin Verlander. Luis Castillo and Christopher Sanchez are my other 2 options. I'm going to lean towards Sanchez for the salary savings. We're going to talk about some of these cheap pitchers in a second. Of the cheap ones, Sanchez picked up the most ownership at $7,200. He also has a great matchup against your Minnesota Twins, who don't really hit anything this year. And Sanchez has shown to have a little bit of strikeout upside. So if you guys have the salary savings, you could go to Castillo in cash games, but I'm going to lean a little bit towards Christopher Sanchez just so I can get the 8,900 Lynn with the 7,200 Christopher Sanchez. I think that is a good start to a build that also gives you a lot of salary flexibility. But now
I don't hate it. Yeah, I don't.
Tournaments. What do you make of Christopher Sanchez? Who he's not super popular, but still he's picking up some ownership at 19%.
Yeah, he's pulling a little bit more ownership than I would like to see at 7,200 for a pitcher of his caliber. He's fine. Again, for the salary savings, that's kind of the major thing. I just basically listed off the first 2 lineups that I had where I just basically just ran it unencumbered. It both came up with Luis Castillo as the SP2, but for tournament purposes, yeah, I mean, that's definitely some major salary savings. The Minnesota Twins, they've just kind of been that team this season that you've attacked with some of these K happy pitchers, or I mean, even non-K happy pitchers. 23.3% for the Southpaw. He's going to get a decent enough lineup with Jordan Luplow now, 31% K rate in a very small sample size here, but I do expect him to strike out a lot. Moved up to the 2-hole here. Joey Gallo at the back half of this lineup, basically he's going to hit a homer off you or you're going to strike him out twice, so that's fun. Same thing with Michael A. Taylor. It's a great strikeout matchup, so yeah, I mean, there's definitely a floor there. For me, it was more of like I think what I'm looking at for a cash game setting is give me the ballpark, which is definitely a leg up for Luis Castillo in terms of stopping the run creation. And then I think he's got a decent enough strikeout matchup with a 5.5 better K percentage than Christopher Sanchez on the season. So I think you're right, where you're probably going to get a lot better bats. You're going to like the look of that, and maybe that's a good way to go.
Yeah, so Christopher Sanchez, who, by the way, also, he is the cheap pitcher I get the most exposure to in tournaments. Low 20% range for me right now. He's in 23.7% of lineup. So it's not like he's somebody who I have a massive overweight kind of take on or anything, but I'm slightly overweight to him. And I do think he's the best place to go to save salary in tournaments at pitcher. And, you know, the field's there as well. Like we said, ownership in the high teens. Are there any other cheap options that you maybe really like for tournaments, or is it more like a mix and match?
It's a little mix and match, but I've got some preferences. I mean, I've got some guys that, you know, if I were building lineups the way that I did once upon a time, Johan Oviedo, he's 16.8% owned. I mean, he's just a little bit lower owned than Christopher Sanchez. I like him more, and I do like Cincinnati. I think Cincinnati's an offense that you can definitely get to, but I kind of like getting to the Oviedo side of this one. His K stuff has progressively gotten better throughout the season. He's sitting at just 20.6% for a K rate on the year now. He's a St. Louis reliever turned Pittsburgh starter, which is always kind of a fascinating thing. But Cincinnati, their K rate has increased over 3% over the course of the last month and a half, and it's very easy to identify why. You get at the top of that lineup, the Ellie De La Cruzes, the Matt McClains of the world. Both of those guys, 28 and 34.2% K rates, respectively. Now, they did put Friedel as the leadoff hitter today at 17.6%, which took a little fraction off the top for me there. But the back half of this lineup with Benson, Fairchild, Christian Encarnacion Strand, Votto, all of these guys strike out north of a 26.5% K rate. There are strikeouts available here. And as you look at the sportsbook props, which I do every single day, and that's how I help identify exactly where I'm going to land for K projections for some of these guys, we have sportsbooks that have 5.5 as the K prop on DraftKings Sportsbook right now, and that is minus 150. So we're looking at a pretty decent spot here for Johan Oviedo to go for 6 strikeouts. He's been a lot better than I think people anticipated, than I anticipated this season. And he's not pulling a whole heck of a lot of ownership. So him and Sanchez, they do kind of stand out in that mid-range for me.
Yeah, I'm getting to more of Sanchez. Underway right now to Johan Oviedo. He does get a free strikeout with Ellie De La Cruz once every time through
your guy.
Oh my God, Ellie De La Cruz. He can't hit anything. He strikes out every at bat. Although he is much better against righties than he is against lefties. So Oviedo, a little bit too popular for me, but I don't mind him really on the low end. Can I ask you about somebody on the low end here that I'm getting some exposure to and don't necessarily feel great about it? Or do you want to try to guess who it is?
Tariq Skubal.
No.
On the low end. So we're talking, is it below or above or below 7K?
Below. Oh, we can do this like 21 questions. You just
okay. Well, I mean, Paul Blackburn is my guy today.
Okay. It is on the other side. So same game, just other side. Jonah Don for me, who
Jonah Don
actually pitched relatively decent his last time out. And, you know, he hasn't had the best track record of being decent or anything like that at the big leagues, but he's pitching against the Oakland A's today. He's at home, and that is always going to be a positive. So Jonah Don, at the very least, is 24 years old. He has decent stuff. His average fastball velocity, 95 miles per hour over the course of his big league career. And, you know, his first start did go fairly decently. We ended up seeing him pitch against the Cincinnati Reds, pitched 6 innings, struck out 7 hitters, didn't walk anybody. So that all looks good. 3.1 FIP in his first start of the season. But most importantly for me, he's super cheap. He is single-digit ownership, and he's pitching against the Oakland A's. That like rarely ever happens when you get those things that come together. Now, do I think Adon is the best pitcher in the world? No, but I think the Oakland A's as an offense are worse than Adon is as a pitcher. He's very cheap and people aren't playing him, so I'm overweight to him as an SP2.
AAA this year, 20.7% K rate, 10.4% walk rate with a 1.51 whip.
Yeah.
At AAA. He's facing a AAA lineup, so that probably helps. But a 25.2% K rate for Oakland on the other side. I mean, he's not good. I mean, Jonah Don's pulling ownership, whereas Paul Blackburn on the other side is not. I know you're biased against Paul Blackburn. I know that you don't like Paul Blackburn. But you got to admit, he's been pitching way better than you would expect. And a lot of it, I'm not even looking at the Ks, and I'm not looking at the back-to-back quality starts with no homers given up in either one of those. I mean, it was at Colorado. That's kind of impressive considering Coors. And then the other one against San Francisco, good pitching ballpark across the street from him there. But I'm looking more at the ground ball rate, which has continued to go up throughout the season. 9-1 against the White Sox, 10-3 against Houston, 8-3. If he's going to be inducing ground balls like this, yes, we don't have a team in Washington that strikes out a lot against righties. 19.1% K rate. I ended up on the over 5.5 for Aaron Nola yesterday. That was a sweat, that's for sure. It's about the only thing I got right yesterday. But Paul Blackburn at sub 7K, there's no doubt that there's 6-7 inning upside. And I know that Oakland also, whether it's, Adon on the other side, the main thing I'm worried about is I think Adon's probably capped out around 90. They don't want to push any of these pitchers the rest of the year. They're extending it to a 6-man rotation. Whereas Paul Blackburn's routinely going for over 100 pitches in every single one of these outings. So Paul Blackburn, my priority in that game for 1/3 of the ownership.
Hey, I don't mind the Blackburn call here. And sure, in the past, I have not liked Paul Blackburn. I expect him to regress a lot of the year, but the numbers are what the numbers are. And he's a pitcher who's generating strikeouts this year. I know you said that also you're intrigued by the ground ball rate, and he's historically been a good ground ball pitcher. But to me, this is a guy who in previous years, but he had never had a strikeout rate above 20% of his entire career. In fact, last year was the first year he had a strikeout rate above 16%. This is a guy who's always had struggles getting strikeouts, but it's 23.3% this year. Striking out about a hitter per inning. The results are overall good. So I don't mind for 3% ownership. I could certainly talk myself into Blackburn. Let me see. What is my exposure to Blackburn as of now?
I mean, what I like the most is that this sinker, which has been his primary pitch for his entire career, he went from throwing it 41.6% of the time in 2021 to just 22.3%. He's actually had a good feel for some of these other pitches that are really the only ones that are going to get you a whip percentage. And in fact, he basically does everything to set up his slider, 20% usage on that pitch. And it's up in terms of how it plays. He has literally seen a drastic change in the way that plays. It's only up about 20 RPMs here, but I mean, it has been a lethal pitch against righties. Basically, righties have no chance against it. So that's at least nice to see one out pitch that he has where there's enough righties in this lineup here for Washington. And I mean, they're going to have a lot of righties in every single lineup that they have for the rest of the year. That I think that there's like a legitimate strikeout upside that might not be shown for a Paul Blackburn here.
I have 5% of Blackburn right now, which, it's about double the field. Not some kind of crazy exposure or anything, but I've got him in there a little bit overweight to him. So I don't mind that at all. I do have more of a Don. Like I said, it's probably he's pitching against the Oakland A's. That's always going to be something that looks pretty decent. Are there any other pitchers here you want to talk about? Either you think that they have ownership that isn't warranted or somebody you want to get overweight to that we haven't talked about. And if not, we'll look at the FanDuel side of pitching.
What do you think about Tariq Skubal? Because he has, let's see. I mean, he's gotten up to 88 pitches here now. I feel like he's a little bit slept on. And I know it's Boston. I know it's Fenway. And I know that it's a pretty difficult spot, no doubt about it. But I still feel like the strikeout stuff is just so live every single time. And when you start talking about some of these other pitchers that kind of sit in that range, and he's 7,500 pulling 3.8% ownership compared to Sanchez and Oviedo. And if you just put a blindfold on and you saw Skubal, Sanchez, Oviedo next to each other, of course you would take Skubal in terms of what that K upside would be in a drastic way. And we're talking about him being 1/6 the ownership of Sanchez, 1/5 of the ownership of a Johan Oviedo. So just a blind backing of somebody that I think has 90+ pitch upside now, even if it isn't a very difficult spot. And also don't sleep on the fact that now Trevor Story is back in the mix. This guy strikes out a ton. So that is a strikeout bat that came from nowhere to on this roster batting 5th today. As much as I want to jam Skubal, I'm not going to be, but I've got double-digit ownership on him.
Not getting to very much of him, and I get all the cases for him. I think he's very talented. If we compare him to all the cheap pitchers we just talked about, there's zero doubt in my mind that he's better than these other pieces of shit that we're talking ourselves into. Right? He's absolutely better, and his stuff has looked great coming back from Tommy John surgery. Like, I've been watching him starts where he's throwing, upper 90s. He's throwing very hard. He's recovered well from Tommy John. I'm still not sure this team is going to, considering where the Tigers are in the standings, that they're going to really want to push him, which could limit his upside at least a little bit. And another thing, too, just the matchup on the road against Boston. It's a big slate. I can't really play everybody. So I'm sure I'll have like a lineup or two with Scooball, but not anything that's going to be any kind of priority for me. I understand where it's coming from, though.
Yep. Somebody wanted to ask about Chris Sale. I have him for 62 pitches today. He got ramped up to 50. Let me find it. It's just like the blurb on DK. 54 pitches in his last outing. And that was just him building up a AAA or AA. And I can't see him working very long into this game. Otherwise, I would have interest.
Yeah, it's a big issue. So his last big league start was June 1st. And he went 3 2/3 innings in that start. So it's like, what are we getting out of him here? And also, it's not like he's super cheap. He's cheap for Chris Sale, but he's not cheap in the grand scheme of things. Like, what is his realistic upside at $7,900 when he's probably pitching 3 or 4 innings? It's like the Kershaw scenario yesterday to an extent. The difference is, Sale is cheaper. He doesn't have quite as easy of a matchup that Kershaw had. But
I had Kershaw for 20 more pitches than I had for Sale.
And still, what did Kershaw go out? He made it through, 5 innings. He was decent, but he scored, 14 and a half fantasy points. You really need pitchers to be going deeper into games to get any kind of real upside out of them. So just like with Clayton Kershaw yesterday, I can't really advocate for Chris Sale today. Anything else you want to talk about on DK? If not, we'll look at the FanDuel pitching.
One more to just throw out there for you. Do you have any Michael Kopech at 0.5%?
No, he just sucks now. It's
Milwaukee.
Crazy too. He looked like he was showing signs of life earlier in the year. He can't even get swing and misses anymore, though.
I know. It's the White Sox, 23.6% K rate. They do lose Jake Berger, who just falls into that category of a Joey Gallo where you're going to get the strikeouts against him. He's also going to hit bombs against you. For me, what happens when I upload everything, I think it's just the 0.5% is playing pretty live where I'm getting to like 6-7% of him. But I just wanted to get your take on him because there's no question that Milwaukee is going to be the most popular team on this slate. And as a result, it just makes me inherently look at that and say, man, Michael Kopech has a path if he's getting swing and miss. But as you said before, it hasn't really been there. There's other spots that I obviously feel better about it, but considering how popular Milwaukee is, I wanted to at least bring him up as somebody that could give you that path in 150 to maybe just really bypass the field.
The other thing too, is you look at how much he's struggling lately, and then he's a 241 BABIP.
Yep.
So it's like,
he's been getting lucky as hell.
It's like he's getting blasted in these starts while getting lucky. So he's a 4.43 ERA for the year, but a 6.2 FIP. He's negative 0.6 wins above replacement. Is that the worst pitcher in baseball this year from a value standpoint?
Got to be close. I mean, Tyler McGill's got to be somewhere in that range too.
Let's see.
Tyler McGill has been unbelievably bad. We'll talk about that.
All right. So I am pulling this up on FanGraph since I was already on there anyway. Wins above replacement for pitchers this year. Kopech is not the worst. Oh, there's somebody who's so bad this year, like bad to a degree that it's ridiculous. Chris Flexen.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Adam Wainwright. That would be the other one.
Well, so the Wainwright, yes, has been terrible. And we're going to talk about him in a second. We talk about pitchers. But Chris Flexen has a 7.92 ERA and a 7.34 FIP this year.
I stay flexing in my candy paint.
Oh, that is no good.
7 on a native all swing.
No good. Here, very impressive. Jose Urania has only pitched 18 innings and is worth negative 0.8 WAR in those 18 innings. So, I mean, this guy is absolute train wreck. But Flexen, who actually has managed to pitch 55 innings this year, has overall produced the least amount of value with that -1 wins above replacement. Other pitchers, notable shout out, Corey Kluber, -0.9 wins above replacement. And Luis Severino, -0.7 wins above replacement, which is crazy. Severino's stuff still kind of looks decent. Like he can still throw 100 miles per hour. He just can't do it without giving up home runs. So those are a handful of your guys' worst pitchers from a wins above replacement standpoint in baseball. But now let's go and look at pitchers over on FanDuel. If you guys haven't done it yet, do us a favor, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. So we're going to break down FanDuel pitchers, then build out some lineups in the lineup generator that we have over at Stokastic.com. FanDuel pitching, Eric. Lance Lynn is going to be just under 40% owned. So some similar conversations to what we had about him on DraftKings. Relative to that ownership, do you like him in FanDuel tournaments?
No, I hate him in FanDuel. I would probably full fade him. So similar to what I did yesterday, where I just talked through the Kershaw thing, I would have 0% on FanDuel. On FanDuel, I'm more inclined to make those big stands and big swings because there are just, you don't have to put two of them together. And then the Castillo, the Burns, the I'm not going to say Verlander, Snell, Morton, who we didn't even talk about before, but there's a decent enough path considering he's 1,400 less. So there's pitchers that are cheaper, the Sanchez's, the same guys there that have their path. And then you've got guys more expensive that can beat him out with the K stuff. So like for me, 8.6% top 1% at 40% ownership, negative 30% leverage on a 13-game slate. I just could not do it.
I feel differently about Lance Lynn on FanDuel than I do on DraftKings. DraftKings, we have to roster two pitchers, and we still have him projected higher above other guys on FanDuel. He's our highest projected pitcher on both sites. He is also more expensive relatively on FanDuel than he is on DraftKings. So, like, if you want to pivot to a Corbin Burns on FanDuel, it is a $900 salary difference as opposed to on DraftKings where it is a $2,300 difference. That is much, much easier of a pill to swallow, especially when you consider the ownership difference. Lance Lynn, 39.1% on FanDuel. Corbin Burns, 6.1%. Luis Castillo, 12.5%. So I find him easier to get away from on FanDuel than I do on DraftKings.
Yeah, I think I'm probably going to play both sites now, even just talking through it. I'm probably going to give him a little bit of a boost after we talk through it. Again, 49%. It's not like I was undercutting Lance Lynn in any way. I mean, I was like 4% under on him. But DK, if I give him a little bit of a boost and just play a little bit more of him, tap that ROI little boost that we got going over in the Sims tool. And then on FanDuel, I'm just going to X him out. I think I could have some fun. I think that's probably the right way to play it today. I'll get all my exposure on DK.
Yeah, I think that, like I said, Lance Lynn, a little bit easier to get away from on FanDuel. But if you are getting away from him, who is it that you gravitate towards? Because I know on DraftKings, you said your guy was Blake Snell. You can make a case for him on FanDuel, but he has 11,000, which is a pretty steep price point. So with that in mind, who is your favorite pay-up option for tournaments on FanDuel? And by the way, Lance Lynn, I want to clarify, still the clear cash game option, but for tournaments, who would you be going to?
Blake Snell is 2% owned. I would absolutely play Blake Snell, and it's an ownership thing meets there are these starts, and I can't tell you when they're going to be, but when Blake Snell doesn't walk guys, he's going to pitch deeper into games. He's going to get you a quality start along with like 9 Ks because that's how his strikeout stuff plays. He's north of a 30% K rate. This is a struggling Arizona Diamondbacks team. It has a lot of the same complexion as it's looked like all season long. It adds a better bat, I think, with Tommy Pham than some of the guys that they've had in the back half of this lineup. But again, this is 2% Blake Snell, which is, 6%, 7% over on DK at the moment. That is very intriguing. 11K. I can still find ways to play an expensive stack with a cheap stack on FanDuel. The cost isn't all that prohibitive on FanDuel. I know that it's $1,100 more than the other guys, and I know it's $500 more than Justin Verlander. I have no interest in Corbin Burns, $200 more. I know he's the most expensive guy there, but I'm kind of in love with it at that number.
I like Blake Snell as well at 2% on FanDuel. If we're going to pay up and be contrarian, Blake Snell, 11,000, cheap price point, but he's 2% owned, like you were saying. Other options here. Verlander is 7.5% at 10,500. No, thank you, relative to these other guys. He's more popular. Yeah, he's more popular than Corbin Burns and then Blake Snell at comparable price points. And these guys are just far superior pitchers at this point in their career. So Verlander, just like on DraftKings, don't have interest in him on FanDuel, like pivoting to these other options. If you're going cheap on FanDuel, who stands out to you? Been mentioning this a lot on shows lately. The FanDuel algorithm has really changed with pitcher pricing, and you kind of get everybody generally gets priced like 8,500 to 11,000. But there are some cheap options that we could get to. Adon, who I was talking about before, is $5,500 on FanDuel.
Yeah, that was the first one that stood out to me. I like getting to the contrarian Paul Blackburn coming off of back-to-back quality starts now in the best spot that he's been in either one of those. He was on the road, San Francisco. You say that's a tough spot. It's obviously a good ballpark to pitch in. And then in Coors puts up a quality start. getting to face Washington with a quality start bonus. And I don't know. I like some of the changes that he's made, and he looks like a better pitcher to me. 8,400. He's 0.6% owned, though. That's the main reason that I would be clicking on him. But Adon, I think relative to price, as you said, he is the fourth most owned pitcher on FanDuel, but 5,500. Go ahead and just get nuts. You can do whatever you want with bats. You can play Atlanta plus the Dodgers with Betts and Freeman and Muncy against a lefty to get different. Like, there's a lot of really fun things you can do rostering Adon. So I'm probably with you. I think 5,500 Adon seems like a lot of fun.
Yeah, and still, I mean, only 6% owned on FanDuel. And, you know, when we're talking about like Paul Blackburn on DraftKings, he's very cheap on DraftKings. He's $8,400 on FanDuel compared to Adon. And by the way, we have a nearly identical projection to Adon and Blackburn over at Stokastic.com. Adon is $5,500 on FanDuel. If you look at the other pitchers who are under 7K on FanDuel, they all suck today. They're all terrible. So Adon is also probably terrible, but he's pitching against the A's and he's $5,500. Your other options, like Dallas Keuchel on the road against the Phillies, is $400 more expensive than Adon at home against the A's.
Dallas Keuchel.
That's what you really you waited for 5 seconds to say Dallas Keuchel.
I'm a Minnesota Twins fan too. I'm going to be cheering for him, but legitimately, his strikeout prop's like 3. It's 3. Like, he was washed like for 3 years. I have no idea what to make of it. Maybe he can keep getting ground balls, but like, I'm not going to roster Dallas Keuchel. No way.
Final part of this: who is more washed, Adam Wainwright or Dallas Keuchel?
Adam Wainwright. They're both washed, but like, I think what you can still get from Dallas Keuchel once in a while is hard contact that's on the ground, whereas Adam Wainwright, it is just moonball galore.
For people in chat who are asking if I'm wearing lipstick today, not on the show. That is a late night activity for Greg. That is not something right now. For later, yes. For now,
when he gets on the plane and flies out to me.
Yeah. Later. Got to check out Eric's new place. Anything else you want to talk about at pitcher? If not, we'll build some lineups in the lineup generator.
Nope. Just want to move on as fast as possible from the last 2 minutes.
All right. So time to dig into the lineup generator. Also, if you guys have questions in Discord, I'm about to check that to see if we have any questions that are popping up there. Einstein asked about Paul Blackburn. We already discussed Blackburn, so I think we got that there. And then also we've got a question from Noah about stacking against Charlie Morton, which we'll hit on in a second. But first, lineup generator time, where Jordan is going to spin the wheel and see what ends up showing up for us in terms of best projected lineups that we can make using stochastic data via the lineup generator tool. And if you guys want to sign up for this, this is the most beginner-friendly tool that we have at Stokastic.com. And the price point, if you sign up using the link in the description box below, less than $5 when you sign up for the first time. So let's go balance lineups. It's a pretty big slate.
I like balance.
I think this is gonna be the first time in a minute that we don't get to just all of the Red Sox.
Probably.
Which it'll be a nice change of pace here.
So I'm
interested to see what ends up popping up here. Something else of note as well. People in chat are asking us about the weather in the St. Louis, Kansas City game. I'm not all that concerned about it as of right now. I'm playing the game as if it's going off, no issues. And look at that. You love to see it. Absolutely love to see it. 74% Kansas City Royals exposure against this absolute dog shit piece of crap. Adam Wainwright. Nobody likes him. Horrible human being. Adam Wainwright, Phil Mickelson.
Is he a bad person? I didn't know he was a bad person.
Probably not. He seems fine.
He seems fine. He seems like an upstanding gentleman with high socks living his life.
Yeah. I just hope he gets railed tonight. Other than that, everything else, he's fine. 74% Royal stacks. Listen, if you guys are building out 20 lineups, I have no issues prioritizing the Kansas City Royals at all.
None. You should be playing them. Yeah. Also, I think Kansas City, I don't think people are really getting how much better they've been since the All-Star break. And then Nelson Velasquez has been awesome at AAA, even though he has no launch angles so far at the big league level. Let's work on that. But you know who does? Michael Massey, who's increased his launch angle drastically since the All-Star break, over a 110 WRC plus since July 9th. Great stuff in terms of launch, along with a 449 expected slugging. I mean, this guy has really turned on the afterburners. This is a Kansas City team that's about 15 pitchers away from being a really good baseball team.
Adam Wainwright And by the way, the other thing too is I would stack the local Little League team against Adam Wainwright right now.
I think I would
He has a 7.81 ERA, a 7.64 expected ERA, 5.68 FIP. He's a 7.81 ERA. You look at the numbers like, oh yeah, it's justified. This is what it should be based on all the underlying metrics. He also has a 13% home run to fly ball rate. So he's giving up an above league average amount of home run to fly balls. And then in addition to that, he is a career worst 37.9% ground ball rate. Oh, also, he doesn't get any swing and misses. Everything goes in play against him because he has a strikeout rate that is currently 12.2%. I don't have in front of me what all the strikeout rates are of every starting pitcher in baseball. If Adam Wainwright isn't the worst, he's close to being the worst. 12.2% is almost impossible for a starting pitcher. Long story short here, go and stack up the Royals. I am totally cool with our lineup generator getting to a bunch of exposure to them.
Yeah, it's one of those spots where you just jam best available. They're not owned enough.
And yeah, it's definitely a spot too. Like you said, the Royals offense probably a little bit better than a lot of people realize, and great matchup today. So no issue with that. The other teams we're getting to, look at these just terrible offenses. But our lineup generator actually is getting to the Oakland A's here against the Don. We're getting to St. Louis Cardinals stacks. Anything that you have feelings about? Are you going to be playing Oakland at all against a Don?
No. Hang on. Who just said that? 50% ground ball rate over his last 30 days for Adam Wainwright. You understand he's had 3 starts in his last 30 days? Did you know that? Or did you not know that? Because he was off for 3 weeks, the 24th, the 29th, the 4th of this month. Those are his last couple starts. They've still been atrocious, even getting ground balls. 2, 4, and 7 earned. Completely dust. Stop it.
So in those starts, like, all right, let's say he's made improvements in the last 3 starts. Like all of a sudden, Adam Wainwright's figured it out at age 42 or whatever he is. He's turned a corner. Those last 3 starts, he's pitched 14 innings, given up 2 homers, and allowed 13 earned runs. Strikeout to walk rate. He has 11 strikeouts and 7 walks.
Yep.
Everything is terrible. There are no positives here to Adam Wainwright. Now, any pitcher could go out and maybe pitches to contact and find some success. The ball goes his way. So it's not like I'm going to go out and play 100% Royal stacks, but I think this is a team to target today. For sure, going up against that.
Totally with you. And yeah, it's saying big park plus ground ball pitcher pass or pass for me. Okay. That's not how this works. 90% of the time, you're going to be right, because even if Kansas City goes for 6 runs, you don't need them. If they go for 8 runs, you probably don't need them. And if they go for 10, it doesn't guarantee you anything, but it probably puts you in. Those are still outlier outcomes. But when you start talking about doing this over multiple days, we have 180, 200 days of baseball. We have how many different slates between turbos and between late night and everything else. You can make decisions like that, but you have to remember ownership's a thing. You have to remember salary is a thing. And the lineups that you're able to make with Kansas City because of what you're able to save, everybody but Bobby Witt is freaking cheap. You have a Sal Perez who has extra eligibility and he's down to 4,400 and that didn't change his power. And then everybody else in this lineup, everybody else is underneath $3,300 on DraftKings. So like, it's the worst pitcher on the slate. And that's saying something because there are some real dust pans on this slate. It's a Kansas City team where we have to think about ownership and salary. And then the ballpark, yeah, you can talk about it, but it is still going to be humid. It's still pretty good hitting weather. So I am going to go the opposite side of you and say that you should have an allotment of stacks for Kansas City, no matter who you are, no matter where you're playing today.
Let's go ahead and look at the player exposures, Jordan. Let's see, of those players from the Royals, who are making it into the most of these Royals stacks. So at pitcher, oh, look at that, 100% Lance Lynn we ended up getting to here.
Oh, God.
Which, if you're playing 20 lineups, I don't think playing 20 out of 20 Lance Lynn is the worst idea in the world. As for the Royals hitters that we're getting the most exposure to, Bobby Witt Jr., Edward Olivares, Miguel Garcia, Salvador Perez, MJ Melendez. So those are the core Royals players that the lineup generator is getting the most of. And then here, as for the Cardinals, Paul Goldschmidt, Nolan Gorman, and then Tyler O'Neill, followed by Nolan Arenado, is the ones we're getting the most of. As for other pitchers, Christopher Sanchez, who I talked about as being my favorite value pitcher earlier. He's somebody we're getting to as top value pitcher. And then Luis Castillo also as an SP2. Corbin Burns, we're a little bit overweight to him there at 16%. Anything else notable to you, Eric?
I mean, it's just 100% Lance Lynn, Kansas City jammed, getting to quite a bit of Oakland against Adon. I think that probably speaks to the fact that Adon is the fourth highest owned pitcher on FanDuel, where I think it does make sense to be getting to some of that Oakland bat exposure. Gives you some really cheap power at the top of that lineup. You have Soderstrom, who's going to end up being a good major league player. Zach Gelof's a good major league player already with a 457 expected slugging. He's as good as advertised. And then, the Jordan Diaz, Seth Brown combination, I don't completely hate it. You have speed with Sturi Ruiz, who was setting the world on fire before people figured out he can't hit anything off speed whatsoever. So I'm all right getting to the top of the Oakland lineup there against Adon, considering how popular he is against Washington, or how popular they are against Adon. Yeah.
I have some exposure to Oakland in my portfolio, but my lineups are so skewed towards St. Louis, Kansas City. Between those two teams, Eric, that accounts for 75% of my stacks on this slate right now.
What?
I'm getting to a lot of St. Louis and Kansas City. So unless the ownership changes on these teams, like that's where a lot of my exposure is going to end up being per running my lineups through the Sims tool here. So St. Louis, Kansas City, getting to both sides of that game. Hopefully 12-12 goes to extra innings or something like that. I would be pretty happy with that kind of outcome. Let's go and build lineups for FanDuel now, Jordan, and see what's popping up on the
I thought that was FanDuel. I thought that was what we were talking about.
No, it was DraftKings.
Oh, okay. So the Adon thing, that's interesting. I probably wouldn't play as much Oakland over on DK. I was going back and forth. I thought enough time had elapsed that I could just skip to FanDuel and do that. But that's
hey, you can do it everywhere. We're about to talk about FanDuel now. Let's see.
Hey, there we go. Because Oakland's a lot more interesting to me on FanDuel. I know, again, you can get to more exposure to them, but with Adon being the fourth highest owned pitcher on FanDuel, I will take some Oakland bats there.
All right. Let's see if they end up popping up for us over in the FanDuel lineup. Same deal, Jordan. Click on the balance lineups. I see. I know you're trying to get my attention by waving the mouse up and down.
Oh, I'm Jordan. Guys, you're not paying attention to me.
Jordan gets paid $6 an hour to click buttons, and frankly, it's too much pay.
Honestly, it's slash it in half.
Same deal, by the way. 65% Cardinal stacks, 60% Royals stacks. So also something to note here is that we have a stack considered in this. Anything where we get more than 3 players from any one team, that gets classified as a stack in our lineup builder. But also something to talk about here is that on FanDuel, like you're just going to make more stacks of 2 teams than you would typically on DraftKings. So I don't have an issue with this at all. Same deal. A lot of Cardinals, a lot of Royals. The team we're getting the most next exposure to, though, Eric, it is the San Diego Padres. We didn't really talk about them in the DraftKings lineups because they didn't show up there. What do you make of them on FanDuel? Because they're showing up in a quarter of our lineups.
My big stand of the day, man. San Diego, that money line is just screaming at me. Minus 160. It's got to be the trappiest thing that I've ever seen in my entire existence. Because when you do implied win probabilities, I mean, you combine the bats. This is a team that has a 99 WRC plus against righties. So they're right at league average. But some of these guys at the top of it that are making their way into my FanDuel lineups, I did just reserve a bunch of lineups in that $3. So I'm excited to play that today and just full fade Lance Lynn. I'm sure that'll go well on FanDuel. But I love getting to the top of that Padres lineup today. There's so much power and opportunity against Ryan Nelson, who just is not a good pitcher, not a good major league pitcher. There's great opportunities for run creation, which matters more for me on FanDuel than it does on DK, where the home run is king. I want to get to lots and lots and lots of the Padres.
Padres against Ryan Nelson. They're projected for some ownership there, 7.6% over on FanDuel. The ownership for the Padres over on DraftKings, 4.7%. The main reason they're so much more popular on FanDuel and DraftKings pricing. Yeah, in general, pricing is just softer on FanDuel. It's easier to fit in studs over there. But the other thing, too, is just they're really expensive on DraftKings and Padres as a stack, which does make them a little bit prohibitive to get to. I didn't get to very much of them as a stack. As for the other teams here, we did get some Oakland, 5% of them, 10% of Toronto. So a little bit spread out beyond St. Louis and Kansas City. And we have 80% of Lance Lynn over on FanDuel in the lineup generator. The other pitchers we got to then. Other pitchers we got to, Luis Castillo, 10% of. And then Justin Verlander, 5%. So underweight to him. And then Corbin Burns, 5%. So good mix of pitchers there once we got past the Lance Lynn. As for the individual hitters, Nolan Arenado, Bobby Witt Jr., MJ Melendez, Paul Goldschmidt, Edward Olivares, Tyler O'Neill, Wilson Contreras, Kyle Isbell, it's always hard for you to make out what is on the screen because things look very blurry when it comes through Zoom. But I was able to make out most of the names there. Anything else you're noticing about the FanDuel lineups?
Yeah, let me just stare at this too. Sweet Melendez, he's hanging out there too again. Yeah, St. Louis, Kansas City. Again, it is a day where both of them make sense on both sites in quite a major way for me. What is the team that we're getting to the third most? Is that Oakland over there again?
San Diego.
Okay, San Diego is third. Okay, just wanted to check. I saw an Oakland one-off that was hanging out there. Who are the Asturio Ruiz and Seth Brown right there, 1-2. So number one and Seth Brown's batting cleanup today, I think. Both of those make sense.
And do you know what San Diego means in German?
Will's vagina.
Exactly. All the more reason to stack them over on FanDuel. So San Diego, I do, like I said, think they make a little more sense on FanDuel than DK. And now let's go ahead and just talk about the rest of our lineups outside of the lineup generator here. And Eric, what are you prioritizing? Which team do you have the most stack of overall tonight?
Yeah, Kansas City is probably going to be number one. It is weird to me to see Milwaukee number two against Kopech. I am going to play a little bit of Kopech now over on DK. I think it's pretty clear cut though. The Kansas City against Adam Wainwright is a spot that is just kind of can't miss for all of the reasons that I elaborated so nicely to Josh Gillum, who, by the way, I appreciate you, my guy. You're always in the chats. You're always respectful, but I wanted to at least throw that out there that there were a couple of reasons that I disagreed with that. Wanted to get to them. I also love getting to the Los Angeles Dodgers. For some reason, across the industry, the last 2 days, they've had some ridiculous things going on with this Los Angeles lineup where people were playing tons of Will Smith, even though it didn't line up. And Clayton Kershaw has had Barnes as his primary catcher in a lot of games so far this season. We also had ran into, Ahmed Rosario, who is going to bat third against lefties. You're going to run into another lefty today. He should be up there in the order again. Max Muncy should continue to be there. And JD Martinez is on the expected lineup in a lot of places that I'm looking, including FanDuel. He's not expected back till Saturday. Dave Roberts said it in a pregame interview 2 days ago. So I don't know why JD Martinez is showing up in these starting lineups. I don't think we have him in there on Cruncher, but I love that the field is going to be doing silly things like clicking buttons and having him in the implied lineup there and not changing it, especially on a slate like this, where I think being able to get to Kiki, getting able to get to players that will obviously have that platoon against Austin Gomber in a good ballpark, in good hitting weather in LA. Definitely want to be getting to more Dodgers too.
Yeah, Dodgers, pretty low-owned team. They're going to be expensive, but if you're looking to go to one of the teams that is low-owned with upside, you could always make a case for the Dodgers, 5.5% projected ownership as a team over on DK there. Spencer Smith in the chat has a very important question. He wants to know how we enjoyed Comic-Con and what we dressed as. We went naked and never left our house. So that was how we enjoyed Comic-Con. As for other stacks on the slate, I mentioned I'm going very heavy in that St. Louis, Kansas City game. Both the offenses are popular, but per our data here, maybe not popular enough because we have the Cardinals projected with a 12.3% chance to be the top scoring team on the slate, but only a 10.4% ownership share. So it is a team, even though they are popular, we still do have projected to be under-owned. So I like getting to the Cardinals. We talked about the Royals. Adam Wainwright is a train wreck at this point in his career, to a point where I don't even think it's very easy to project how bad he is. Because when would you project a pitcher to have a 7 ERA the rest of the season? And that's kind of what I expect Adam Wainwright to be going forward. As for contrarian stacks to get to, the contrarian stack that I currently have the most exposure to is, are you ready for this, Eric?
The Minnesota Twins.
It is the Minnesota Twins.
Mine too.
It is the Minnesota Twins. So Minnesota Twins, it's not like they have the highest upside in the world, but I do like both sides of this game. Christopher Sanchez is a pitcher that's cheap. He has some strikeout upside, but it's not like he is some stalwart pitcher that is infallible. So when he is going to be picking up some ownership on the slate, although with that said, it has come down a little bit as the show has gone on. So maybe this will change the outlook of things a little bit once I've rerun lineups, because he's now projected for 14.9% ownership as to before he was like 18%. But I like getting some exposure against the Minnesota Twins. They're really cheap, and they're going up against a pitcher who's picking up some ownership who's, mostly an unknown. So I like both sides of it. I like the Twins. I like Christopher Sanchez, and it seems like it's the same for you.
Yep. It's pretty clear cut to play both sides of it. We talked about it with the Don. I'm actually not going to be playing Nationals against Paul Blackburn, which is weird to give him that kind of respect, but lots of strikeouts available for Minnesota. But they've also been, since the All-Star break, a team that's played pretty up for against lefties at the moment. Now, Jordan Luplow, that's a big unknown for me. There's also always going to be pinch hit risk for him, considering what we've seen every other team, how they've utilized him in the past, even if it hasn't happened as much here with the Twins. But Jeffers has been smashing baseballs since the break. Jorge Polanco, even Kepler, left on left, over a 450 expected slugging, 500 expected slugging on the season. So, yeah, I will take some Twins for sure.
All right, so now let's do some home run picks and we'll wrap up because I know Jordan's getting antsy there. He's wearing his defense hat. He's all pumped up for football. He asked us if we can make sure that we're done a couple minutes early so we get set up for the football show because it takes him so long to click all the buttons that he has to press. So, Jordan, don't worry. I got you in mind. I'm going to do you a solid. Yeah, but we're going to wrap up a couple minutes early for you as you requested. And, guys, we are sponsored by Sleeper today. If you want a $100 bonus on your first deposit, sign up at Sleeper using the link below. And also, they have a lot of no free squares today, but we have seen a lot of free squares from Sleeper that you're going to get access to when you sign up over there. Home run pick, Eric. Who are you picking to go yard tonight?
Talked about all of the changes. He continues to show up at the top of my home run model, and I'm plus 630 today on FanDuel Sportsbook. Michael Massey, Kansas City. I think you'll like that one. I just like the changes that he's made to his loft. And if he's going to be doing this against Adam Wainwright, I don't see him in any way, shape, or form missing that ball, that beach ball coming down his way. He goes yard in that 50% humidity, 90-degree weather in KC.
I bet him at plus 580 to homer earlier today, so I don't mind it.
Well, you should have waited. Plus, what is it? Plus 630 now. Yeah.
Let's see. What do I want? I want to take a Royals player here, but
I just did. And you're a trader. Yeah. You're going to end up picking some short odds BS.
No, you know what I'll do instead? I'll go Nolan Gorman. I like both sides of the game. It's what I'm targeting a whole bunch. Nolan Gorman's only projected for 8% ownership. He's one of my most rostered hitters on the entire slate. I'll make him my home run call. Nolan Gorman to go yard. Let's get a shootout in St. Louis and Kansas City. 8-8 or something like that. Guys, thank you very much for watching. If you have not done yet, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and stick around because right after us, Matt Gajeski and Laffy are going to be breaking down NFL slate. Not Laffy? Oh, Neil. Okay, Neil and Matt Gajeski going to be breaking down the NFL slate. So go watch those guys break down preseason. Good luck. Have a great weekend. See you guys back here on Monday.